Welcome to another episode of Dad Up Everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I am rejoined for episode number 2 with my good friend Mark Collins, and he has joined me to not only talk about what he's been up to the last couple months. I had him on a couple months ago. He was on episode 260. So I highly recommend if you're watching this right now that before you go through this episode, I would highly recommend you go back and watch episode 260. It was from a few months back. Because we talked all kinds of stuff and we had a really great conversation. And so it's it'd be beneficial for you to go check that out before you dive into this episode. But when you do that, do not forget to come back to this episode and watch this one as well. But Mark, thank you very much for being on with me again, man. I was really excited when you and I have stayed in contact the last couple months, and I knew that we had mentioned from the first episode having you back on again, and so I'm excited to do this. So welcome back, brother.
Thanks so much, Brian. I'm excited. It's nice to be back in the conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talked about your book, but you had mentioned before we started recording that you got the workbook now, which I think is beneficial for anybody that it goes through your program and reads your book is to have that workbook attached. But the last couple months, I know it's only been a couple months, but at the same time, a lot of stuff has gone on. So why don't we talk about where you've been the last couple months and what new you've got going on right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking, Brian. I think, well, for me, it's the thing I talked about with you before. I created a workbook, and I don't know, some of the guys may be a lot like I am, which is you read something that, you hope is transformational and it gives you some aha moments and some ideas. Uh, but then it gets to the back of your mind, then you're busy with work, business, life, family, and all of a sudden the things that you could have applied to really kind of elevate who you are as a dad, as a husband, fall by the wayside because you didn't really track it like you should. So I created the workbook so that not only could you read the book, Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, not by default, but now you can start to take some notes. So for me, journaling, putting it down on paper, really giving myself the opportunity to process and then go back is something that really elevates how I can live my life. For us, it's the language that I talk about is life mastery. Like life mastery of me living from who I'm created to be at the highest level I'm created for. Well, I can't get there if I don't really kind of track it, really try and, cement some of those ideas that are going to make me changes. So that's where the workbook was. For me, it's all about resources, Brian, really trying to provide more and more resources so the guys can really start to elevate and unlock the hero that they truly are in their life, and especially as it pertains to being a dad.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think it's very helpful, even for someone like me. I'm like you. It's like I read something and then I may have to read it 2 or 3 times over the course of a year or two just to make sure I don't forget the stuff that's in it. I take notes, highlight things within the book and
Yeah.
all that, and you could do the same, obviously, with your book. But having the workbook attached to it, I know that anytime that I pick up a book. If I purchase a book, if there's a workbook attached to it, I'm always buying that workbook, always, because I want to make sure that, hey, now I don't have to jack up the book so much. Now I can actually take notes in the journal, and then, in journals and stuff like that that are attached to books, sometimes they have different questions or different assignments that you have to do, and so I think that's super helpful and just an added bonus to your book. So that's awesome. Let me ask you this, when it comes to life mastery and all that, I know talking about unlocking your hero, and I had mentioned this to you before we started recording, but specifically for dads, because we're into the new year now. Jesus, we are almost 3 months into the new year, but we're
Yeah.
2 months into the new year now, and we are at a point in our lives where it's like we set up these goals for ourselves every year, right? And then we get through the first 30 days and we're trying to maintain and keep up with our goals, and then life hits us in the chin and we completely just kind of forget the goals that we were trying to achieve because we've just got so many other things going on. As a dad, as a husband that may be out there that are struggling with various challenges they're going through right now.
Yeah.
They had life goals that they were going to accomplish this year, and then boom, something happens, or they get distracted, or they just get busy. And so now they're stuck, or now they've just kind of let it, well, you know what? There goes that goal. Oh well, I'll try again next year. I'll try again some other time when I have more time. I want to become a better dad, Mark. I want to become
Yeah.
that hero for my kids. I want to become that hero for my wife. I mean, how do dads in particular, I'm speaking to dads, how do dads in particular unlock that inner hero? And I know that's something that you specialize in. So help me out with that.
Yeah, I think, the first thing I would say is you need to change your goal and to make it a vision. When you can transform a goal to a vision, a goal is really just something to accomplish. And it's not that it's bad, right? We have goals in all sorts of areas of our life, whether it's our health or our well-being or finances. But here's the challenge is that, a goal is really nice, but it's not something that drives you on those days when things are getting in the way. In those times where maybe you've had a few days, I was going to do this, right? I was going to have nightly conversations with my kid. I was going to put him to get bed and pray with him. I was going to, whatever the thing is that you're trying to do to become that dad that you believe you can be, the thing that really is going to drive you is having a vision for what that looks like. And so for us, we talked about in the previous episode, if people have listened or going back to listen to it, is understanding what life mastery is. And life mastery is you living from who you're created to be at the highest level you're created for. And that's in every area of your life. But specifically as a dad, it really comes down to the question of, the ideal dad that you believe that you want to be and you can be. What does that guy look like? Right, what's the investment he's making with the kids? What are the words that he's saying, and what's the things that he's imparting, the things that he's speaking over his kids, and how he's helping them grow, right? That man that you believe you can be or you want to be. Or honestly, like you and I, Bryan, maybe we've had an example of a father in our own household. It wasn't probably perfect, maybe sometimes it wasn't good, but sometimes we can use that as an understanding of, I don't want to be that person. But again, it comes down to this: what's the vision that you're going for? Because that's the unmistakable thing. That's the thing that doesn't have a expiration date and it doesn't have a starting point. It's not, the new year and now I'm going to do it. It's, hey, how can I unleash the person I'm created to be? Because here's what I know, Bryan, every man who's listening to this, there's a reason why they're a father. And there's a reason why they're a father to their specific children. There's an impact and there's an investment that we get to make, but it's not only in the activities, it's really an understanding who's the man I need to be, who's the father that I need to be the best for these children. So it comes down to identity, understanding who you are. We talk about that, and we talked about that last time, right? Understanding who you are, not what your past has told you, and maybe your experiences have showed you, but really who's the dad I'm supposed to be, and how can I have a vision for that guy? And then I can start to take some tangible steps, some concrete, steps towards being that man. But it always starts with the vision.
Okay, well, I think that's great, and visualizing anything that you need to do or want to do in life is always beneficial for me in particular. It's something that I have always strived to do when I'm trying to obtain something in particular. It's one of those things where I visualize what it would be like to accomplish that, have that, or live that way. And as you know, I'm an avid runner, and I
Yeah.
share this because this last weekend I accomplished. I did my eighth marathon, and it
Nice.
was it was one of those things where a couple of months ago, back in November, I ran the Las Vegas Marathon, and my time was okay. It wasn't great. It was better than my previous marathon that I had
Hmm.
done. So I had improved by just 2 seconds. I had a 2 second improvement. And I knew then that I said, okay, my next marathon in Arizona, which is 2.5 months, 3 months away, I want to be able to accomplish a better time. So I had to start visualizing what is that time to me? And I'm sharing this example just to kind of relate to what you were just talking about. But I said, what is the time that I would like to achieve? Why do I want to get to that time? And how am I going to get there? And what's it going to be like when I finish that race with that time or better? And I drilled that in my head constantly for the last three
Hmm.
months. I was focused on, okay, like you said, you visualize it. How great would it be for me to accomplish this time in the Mesa, Arizona marathon? And then, okay, if I have to accomplish this time, what are the steps I need to do in order to get there? So I started planning. I started coordinating not only my training, my runs, my eating habits, all these different things I was implementing into my schedule.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was sticking to them. I had accountability partners, not only from my boys and my wife, but also a running buddy that I have. So I had accountability that was there. I did all those things necessary, but more important than those things, I was constantly visualizing that reaching that goal of what I wanted to do. Now, I'm not a fast runner. My goal, I mean, my running time in Vegas was 5 hours and 36 minutes. And I thought, okay, I would like to get to some point where I'm at a sub 5 hour marathon. But for right now, I'm going to make it realistic and say if I can shave 10 seconds off my time from Las Vegas, if I could hit like a 5:25 marathon in Mesa, then my next marathon, which is Salt Lake City, my next marathon, I'll shave off another 10 seconds. If I can gradually get that where I'm realistically shaving off time, that I would be happy with that. And I worked my butt off, Mark. I was
I
consistent,
imagine.
I was disciplined. And during the Mesa, Arizona marathon, so many times during that race, my legs were saying, we're done. You need to walk. We can't handle this anymore. You need to give up. It's okay if you don't reach your goal. All these different variables, I call it the devil inside of me, right? All these different
Yeah.
variables were talking to me, telling me to quit, telling me to give up, telling me it's okay. You don't have to achieve it this time. We'll get it next time. And I didn't quit. I stuck with it, as painful as it was. And the funny thing is, uh, I was approaching the last 5 miles of the race,
Wow.
and my buddy was texting me, and I was listening to it because I had my headphones in. So I was voice texting him back. And he's like, bro, you're almost there. Keep going. You got this. You're going to do it. You're going to get that time. And I was telling him, my legs are killing me. Like I'm ready to give up. But I didn't. I stuck with it.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, I think it's because of the visualization of I constantly visualized during that race crossing that finish line and getting my time of 5:20. That's what I wanted to get, 5:20, and cross that finish line at 5:17. So
Yeah.
not only did I accomplish my goal, but I surpassed it by almost another 10 minutes. So I beat my Vegas time by 20 minutes. And
Wow.
to do that in just under 3 months, to beat your time by 20 minutes is insane. That's a
Wow.
huge thing to do, right? And I attribute that to the visualization. So I share that, and I know it's a long story, but I share that because, hey, I visualized that happening and I made it happen. And I think, as you said, for dads, it's really not worrying so much about what your past experiences were, but
Yeah.
discovering who you can and should be in the future by visualization. And then it's not just visualization, it takes work. It's
Yeah.
not just, okay, I'm going to visualize this and it's going to happen. No, that's not how it works. You can visualize it, but you have to implement the steps to get there. And
Yeah.
those steps are different for everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you illustrated there because there's a couple of things. The first one is the visualization. I mean, if I could unpack it even a little farther, the
Mhm.
interesting thing is that, you're not going for a goal of running a marathon, but there's an idea and an understanding you have of who you are, who Bryan is as a man, right? A man of health and, of character, of fortitude and diligence. And, and all of those things are worked out in the realm of marathon running. So it's not really a goal that you achieve because, I finished my goal, whichever it was, right? I've finished one marathon and now I'm done. No, these are the things that a healthy Bryan looks like. A healthy Bryan is one who achieves goals, who stretches beyond what is comfortable, who does, consistently invest in his health for his well-being and his future, right? So there's this vision of who you are. And then underneath that, there's the goal and understanding of, okay, well, this is what it looks like lived out. And so for the men who are listening, the dads who are there, it's the first off the vision of what is the perfect dad that you're created to be. Not that you have to be perfect and everything's there, but this ideal you, right? A man of compassion and care, a man of strength and fortitude, a man who's a teacher and a caregiver as well, or whatever the things are, right? Writing it down, not just visualizing it as in one time I see it and now I try and do it. But like you talked with yourself, it's this continual reminder of who I am. Because when I understand who I am as a dad, I start to show up. But
Mhm.
then the thing I would give the guys is, I'm guilty of this as well. It's, you want to attack the whole thing all at once. But incremental increase in being better as a dad will get you farther than trying to tackle everything and do a wholesale change in your life. And then it's exhausting, it's crazy, it doesn't work out, and you give up in a month. So really, to me, it is the visualization, it is the tangible steps as you talked about with yourself. It's knowing what does 1 inch better look like? What does
Right.
one conversation better look like? What does one interaction with my children that's better look like? And then invest in that thing. It's maybe having a conversation with your kids on a day. It's checking in with them after school. It's using the last conversation of the day to tell them that you love them or to speak, an investment in them or whatever the thing is, right? You know what seems right to you as a father, but taking that one tangible step. It's not attacking the whole enchilada at once. It's
Right.
saying what's one thing I can change and consistently do. And in that place, start to see that investment. And then you take the next one after that. And when the first one becomes a natural part of who you are, it's natural for me to tell my children I love them. It's natural for me to tell them something that they're doing amazing. It's natural for me to tell them what I see in them that's an amazing characteristic of who they are. Once that becomes natural, then you can add the next one to it. And by the end of 2025, you're going to have an amazing year and your family's going to have an amazing impact from the dad who showed up as the person he was created to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that, going back to the example that I shared about running, it wasn't me trying to say, okay, I'm going to just, I'm definitely going to run a 3 hour marathon. I mean, it's just unrealistic. I need to take this
Yeah.
in small incremental steps because if you try to shoot for something too large, like me trying to run a 3 hour marathon, I knew that was just way too large for me to accomplish right now. But if I tried to shoot for that and failed, now I'm very disappointed because now I didn't accomplish my goal of what I wanted to achieve. But if I take these small little steps, celebrate those small wins, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I was shooting for 10 minute improvement and I got a 20-minute improvement. So that's a huge win for me. I'm going to celebrate that. That's not where I want to be. That is not where I want to be. I want to be a sub 5, but I accomplished my goal and I accomplished more than my goal. So I'm going to celebrate those small wins. So for dads, when you go through these trying to make these little changes that Mark's talking about, these small incremental changes, it's these little percentages better every single day to make yourself better by the end of the year. Imagine where you'll be from now to the end of the year. Imagine how much better your life will be. Celebrate those wins. When
Yeah.
you say, hey, I'm going to sit down with my son every night and I'm going to have a conversation with him just to see how he's doing and check in with him because I want him to know that he's loved and I want to bond with him and build that relationship with him. Do that for a couple weeks and celebrate those. I committed to that for a couple weeks and I did it. It feels great. I'm going to make sure I keep doing it because I like this feeling. I like this sense of accomplishment. I like the sense of winning. And to me, that was winning. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I could have been the only person out there on that race. And hey, listen, like I said, a 5 hours and 17-minute marathon is not a fast marathon. But I did it, and that's something that I wanted to do. And for me, that was fast. That was my fastest time. So I was celebrating that win. I didn't give a crap if somebody ran it in 2 hours. I didn't give a crap if somebody ran it in 4 hours. I didn't give a crap if somebody ran it in 7 hours. For me, that was a huge win, and I celebrated like crazy about it. So um, I think it's great. Celebrating those wins is cool. But now, Mark, we hit those roadblocks. Now, like I said before, life gets tough, life gets
Yeah.
hard, life throws us curveballs. And now the dad is frustrated, and now the dad's distracted. And now the dad says, Mark, visualization's great and setting up the steps is great, but it hasn't worked out for me. I keep hitting these roadblocks. What do I do? How do I get myself out of this little rut? Because when I get distracted and get frustrated, now my vision is derailed. So now what do I do?
Yeah, and so there's a couple of things I would probably unpack with you, and the first one would be this is trying to figure out why you're running into roadblocks. Life happens to everybody, right?
Right,
Like with you, I mean, you're a marathon runner, which means you're probably putting a lot of time on the road.
right,
You're putting a lot of time going out there, but I would assume with your life, just like mine and everybody else's, this isn't the only hobby you have. This isn't the only activity that fills your day. There's a lot of other things that are in the way. So the interesting thing I would say would be that many times who we believe we are will become. And so you either rise to the level that you believe you can achieve or fall to the level that you think you deserve. And in
Mm,
that place, my question would be again, it's a vision of who you are as a dad, and what's standing in the way many times is our inability to believe that we can actually be that person.
mm,
Whether it's, you know, my dad showed me a certain mode and I keep going back to using anger, I keep going back to, you know, giving up, I keep going back to whatever the thing is that, you know, was modeled for you. And or it's that understanding, you know, for the work that I do with life mastery, it comes down to identity. Who you believe you are, you'll become. I said in our last conversation, and it's still true today. So, as a dad, who you believe you can be, who you believe you are as a dad, the person you believe you can be in there is who will show up. So, if you're having a challenge with frustration and things that are standing in the way, the first thing I would ask is, what is your idea and identity as a dad? Who do you say you are when times are happening, where your kids are, you know, whatever, disrespectful, or where you're tired and, you know, something isn't going right in your day and you're having an interaction that maybe didn't turn out the best? Who do you believe you are? Because that's the guy that'll show up. If you change that, you'll change who you are. And the second is, I mean, I'm sure you're amazingly consistent, Bryan. I try to be in my life as well, but you know what? Every once in a while, sometimes there's a miss. Maybe sometimes I was sick, so I didn't decide to exercise, or whatever the thing is that is your goal, specifically being a father, right? Sometimes there was an interaction that didn't turn out well. And now I'm not, you know, I didn't say goodnight. I didn't tell them I love them. I didn't invest in them in a positive way. In fact, I did maybe a negative thing in my life. Part of what we can understand as a dad is it's not just the things I say, it's the modeling I give.
mm.
So in the place where maybe I've done something that, you know, I had a negative interaction, I didn't respond in a way that I wanted to, but in a way that I used to. The most powerful thing you can do many times is to go back to your child and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done this in this way." You know, it's a big subject we could unpack, but sometimes humility is saying, I blew it, I didn't do it the best I could, I'm going to do better in the future. And in that place, asking forgiveness from them, but also forgiving yourself.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have a model of perfection. And what I love about what you talked about in your run is you weren't running the race and picking times that somebody else had. I need to have John or Mary's goal in my life. That's what a great marathon runner looks like. And so I have to be them. But how can I be better at being me? How can I, you know, shave time and, you know, minutes and seconds off of what my best is, not looking at somebody else and saying, I need to be them to be a father that's good.
Mm.
And so some of the times it's understanding, can you forgive yourself, but can you use the model of, I'm just going to be better at being me. And when I fall short, I'm going to pick myself up and do it again. It's in this place of not giving up, this tenacity of saying, I refuse to believe I can't become that father that I believe I can be. That can get you through hard times, can get you through frustration, can get you through those times when your interactions weren't where they're at. So humility and modeling it in the things you say and do, forgiving yourself in those times you fall short, having a vision, not just for what I want to be as a dad, but for who I am, who you think you are, you'll become. What are you telling yourself? And what are you reminding yourself of? That vision is something you remind yourself of on a daily basis so that you don't forget the person you're going to become and the person you have the capability of being.
Yeah, no, I love that. You open it up with humility, I think is huge because that is something that I preach to dads all the time about. Listen, we as
Yeah.
dads, for whatever reason, we have these egos that we carry. We it's our way or the high. I mean, that's how I was raised. My dad was like,
Yeah.
it's my way or the highway kind of
Yeah.
mentality.
Me too.
And it used to drive me nuts. And it's like even though as a young man, there were times when I knew my dad was wrong. I knew my dad was wrong, but he wasn't going to admit it. He had his ego was too big for him to say, you know what, I was wrong. And that's something for me that I've shared with people, especially on this podcast. That was something for me that I had a
Yeah.
hard time breaking through because that's how I was raised. It was my past experiences that were keeping me this going down the same road that my dad went down raising his kid, meaning me, that I was raising with
Yeah.
my boys. And it's something that I had to, it was that cycle that I had to break. And now, as my boys started getting older, I mean, my wife, I attribute a lot of that credit to my wife. She was very good about reminding me about, hey, you're wrong here. And you really should acknowledge that with, whatever son it was or both boys.
Yeah.
You're wrong in this situation. And I'm sorry that you're wrong, but you're wrong. And you need to acknowledge that with them. And I had to really like hit myself in the face and say, okay, I'm wrong. I have to admit this to them. And it's amazing. It is amazing the level of bond, love, development of the relationship, how much it grows when you go to your child and go, you know what? Listen, dude, I was wrong. I was wrong how I reacted. I was wrong how I treated you. I was wrong in what I said. And I want you to know that I acknowledge it. And one of the most important things that I tell dads, when you do this to your child, when you go and you acknowledge that you're wrong, one of the most important things you can do is get down to their level, meaning their eye
Mm,
level, and look them in the face. Make eye contact with them at their level and say, I was wrong. I acknowledge it. I know I was. And I want you to know that I'm sorry, number one. And
yeah.
number two, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that that doesn't happen again or that I don't respond that way again. Can't say
No,
that
I
I'll
love
be
that.
perfect, but I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure it doesn't happen again. But I want you to know that I'm sorry and I love you. And it's amazing to see a child's face light up when they say, because you can see the little clock going in their little minds thinking, and they're just going, wow, my dad is is acknowledging he's wrong. My dad is saying, "Hey, you know what? I mean, he is human after all, right?" It's one of
Yeah.
those things where it's like, and so for you to be have that humility and to be able to acknowledge that is so powerful and goes a long way. And you know what, dads, it's not only for your kids, it's for anybody in life. It's for your
Yeah.
spouse. Imagine the difference in your relationship when you go to your wife instead of being so headstrong and you guys are set in your ways and you're not seeing eye to eye and you're sticking to your guns. When you know you're in the wrong, admit it. You know what? I was wrong. I do that with my wife. I make mistakes
Yeah.
almost daily with my wife. And I go, you know what, honey? I was wrong. I call her my queen. I go, you know what, queen? I was wrong. You're absolutely right. That I was wrong on my part. Sorry about it. And we let it go, and then it's done and over with. So,
Yeah. No, I love that. And here's the truth. We talked about it quite a lot in the first conversation we had. It's all about identity and who you believe you are and
mm-hmm,
who you're created to be versus what your life has told you. The more you understand your identity, the more you understand who you are, the more you give yourself permission to not be perfect, to not
mm-hmm,
have to be perfect. A lot of times we're guarded and we can't admit we're wrong, and myself included, right? When I was walking through my life mastery journey, and even today, right? In those times where you're like, I need to control this, but I need to control myself. I need to be able to do these things because there's these insecurities, these issues, these challenges that come up where we feel like we're not measuring up. It's this idea of needing to be perfect in order to be good enough. But when you understand who you are, you give yourself permission to not be perfect. And in that place, humility comes so much more easily. And you can admit wrongdoing, mistakes, and things that you did that were in error because there's no identity statement taken from it. And at
mm-hmm.
the end of the day, are you committed to being right or are you committed to being better?
Right.
If you're a dad who's committed to being better, being a better father, being a better model of what it looks like to be a man in their lives, the more you'll see those things come in yourself. And for myself included, Bryan, it's not easy. It's not easy when you make a mistake and you're like, and this isn't going to be the first time I say I'm sorry or I made a mistake. But in that place, the modeling you give them of what integrity looks like, humility looks like, and what it looks like to confidently walk in a relationship in a healthy way, it 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 vastly overcomes those issues of uh that hesitation where you're there and in that place. It's an investment that your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren will reap the benefits because you've done it. And so there's an outcome that's worth the walk in humility and to be able to become that better dad. So it's worth it is like what I'm trying to say. Just continue to do that and look for people that you can walk alongside. Like you talked about with your running. I love that accountability. And it's not an accountability so that we can both be perfect. It's an accountability to saying, I'm where you're at and let's walk towards that better dad version of ourselves together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to add to what you were saying there when it comes to, admitting our wrongs, when we're doing those with our own kids, when we're saying, "Hey, listen, dude, I'm sorry, I messed up, and I shouldn't have acted that way. I shouldn't have responded that way. I shouldn't have treated you like that. I want you to know I'm sorry." when you say those things to your kids, or to your wife for that matter, but especially to your kids, when you say those things to your kids, they start to realize that, hey, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to mess up.
Yeah.
Acknowledging those mistakes and acknowledging your wrongdoings and then moving forward with them is the lesson that they're learning. And so when they start to get
Yeah.
older and start to learn from your behavior, how you responded, how you acknowledged your wrongdoings to them, they start to see that and grow and learn from that. And then they start to do it as their time goes on. When they get, my boys are adults now, and there have been many times when my boys have made mistakes with me and they have acknowledged it. And I think that's a direct
Yeah.
reflection of the way that they saw me raising them or my wife raising them, saying, hey, we're wrong. They're acknowledging, hey, I messed up, Dad. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. I reacted that way. And we let it go. It's amazing how much quicker things move on and things get back to
Mm.
normal when you acknowledge and get past it and learn from it and just let it go. When you don't, that's when there's still those, that wall is just that barrier is still a
Yeah.
little up. And especially when it comes to our wives, when we're not seeing eye to eye and we're both not acknowledging, hey, I'm wrong or she's wrong, we're not acknowledging it, then there's that constant tension that's in the air and you can feel that heaviness in the air. And it's just, what, life's too short to worry about stuff like that. You need to acknowledge your wrongdoings, get past it, grow from it, learn from it, and move on. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's what healthy looks like. So that is
yeah.
the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk about our kids because we know that our kids can go through struggles and challenges throughout their lives. How do we teach? Let's just do this instead of we go through this whole lesson of how do we teach our kids to uncover the hero within themselves. How do we help them? Um, give me one step. Let's say, what's the first step we should do in order to, as parents, to teach our kids to really uncover that hero within themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So beyond what we've already talked about, modeling it in your own life, right, which is a massive area
Right.
of investment and influence is modeling it. So all of that aside, which is a given, right, for us, to me, it all comes down to words. The one thing that I tell
Mm,
people is that my one of my primary duties as a father is to speak the belief I have of them in them until they see it
mm,
in themselves, the impact that they're supposed to have, the character that they're displaying, the uniqueness of their gifting and their abilities, right? It's speaking their identity into them until they see it in themselves. The more I do that, the more I give them the option and opportunity to see it in themselves. Many times, like in our own lives, right, Bryan? We invalidate the what we call normal characteristics of ourselves. We discount the impact we have in the things that we do because it's just us being us. We don't realize that there's a uniqueness to that character, that ability, that personality, that gifting. And so with our children, I think, especially to be totally honest, because there's so much that they're inundated with, the
hmm.
world, their social media, their friends, their folks around them are going to tell them who they are, whether it's the truth or a lie.
Right.
And it's an amazing influence. And so in that place, the influence I can have is by speaking the truth of who they are to them until they see it in themselves. And in that place, they'll find that we're a safe place. I mean, gosh, there's just so much to unpack. In that conversation of being able to be humble enough to say you're wrong, it creates an open doorway for trust to build. And in that trust, they trust the things we say. And because when they get older, I'm not sure about your children, but for sure with mine, there's this transition that happens from parenting from instructor to influencer.
Hmm.
When you're young and you're raising them and growing them and trying to create habits and attributes in them so that they can, thrive as an adult. There's that portion. But when they start to become an adult, there's this weird transition that I wasn't really great at. I wanted to keep them younger and kind of be the young child's father when I needed to be the older one. And so it was a journey I had to go on, but there's a transition that goes from instructor to influencer. And the open doorway to allow you to have influence is those trust factors that are built up through hard conversations, through uncomfortable moments, through times when you need to be vulnerable and honest. But it all comes down to this: your words matter more
Mm.
than you think they do, and more than their child will maybe acknowledge. Your words matter. And if you use those to raise them up into, life mastery, who they're created to be at the highest level they're created for, give them a vision for the amazing person in life that they can have. And many times they'll see it in themselves, they'll adopt it for themselves, and they'll live the life from that.
I love that. Words matter is so important, and it's something that I have talked about a lot. There's two areas of parenting that I think are super important when it comes to raising our kids to be the best that they can be. Number one is the time that we spend with them.
Yeah.
And I've shared this many times, but kids spell love, Time. The amount
Yeah.
of time that we spend with our kids and the words that we choose to use with them. Those are the two very important, or probably two of the most important things you can do in raising your children. Because listen, you can spend all the time in the world with them, but if you are not using the right words with them, that time that you're spending won't matter because they're going to grow up based on the words that they heard. Yeah, my dad was there all the time, but he was an ass. He didn't love me. He didn't care about me.
Yeah.
He didn't appreciate what I was doing. He constantly put me down. So yeah, he may have spent every waking minute with me, but I hated it because he treated me like crap. He didn't like you could have that type of dad. You could also have that type of dad that is like, hey, I love you, kid. I think the world of you, man. You could spend all your time in the world telling them everything
Yeah.
they need to hear, but you're never there. I know my dad loved me. My dad loved me tons, but he was never around.
Hmm.
My dad never spent any time with me. I mean, we hardly know each other
Yeah.
because he was never there. So, yeah, does he love you? Of course he loves me. At least he told me he did, but I never saw him because he was so busy with his job or so busy doing that or this. I never saw him. So we never spent any time together. So we really don't know each other, but I know he loves me. So those two things, words and time, are important. They have to go together. As parents, we have to do the words we say and the time we spend with our kids. Those things have to go together in order for you to have a solid relationship with your child. And I think it's right on money. You talked about it with the words that we speak. It's so powerful and so true. I thank you for sharing that, man.
Absolutely. And one quick thing, if I could, can I give you a
Yeah,
cheat code? So the cheat
sure.
code on the words is this: acknowledge accomplishments and highlight character. And what I
Mm,
mean is a lot of times, I made this mistake myself where your children gets an A or they, do well at a contest or they win some sort of, thing that they're involved in and you celebrate them for their accomplishment. And there's a certain level of value there. But if I only celebrate you for your accomplishment, there's this unspoken understanding that I'm only good when, right?
mm,
I'm good because. And that can really build an attribute that says that I need to be successful in order to be valuable. So I always acknowledge accomplishment. Hey, it's great that you won that spelling bee. But here's what I love about you is that I could tell you were stuck on that one word, but you really fought through. You really stuck with it until you did that. I love your character of being unwilling to give up in hard times. I loved seeing that in you. When you
mm.
celebrate their character, you invest in them in ways that'll, you know, provide accomplishments in those things, but it shows them value apart from accomplishment. So your words, definitely acknowledge accomplishment, but invest in character, speak their character first and most, and they'll start to see that in themselves.
I love that. That's great. Those go hand in hand for sure. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it, Mark. Let's talk about your book real quick. Best place for my listeners to pick it up. And then obviously, can you talk a little bit about what's in the workbook in particular? What kind of things would they be able to do inside the workbook that goes along in conjunction with the book itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, Not by Default. You can get an ebook version on my website, which is freedom-for-life.net. Obviously, I love electronic books because you can have them on any device, take them
Hmm.
anywhere. But you can also get the hard copy on Amazon because you can get everything on Amazon. So yeah, Amazon for hard copy, electronic version on my website. And what's the value in the workbook? For me, the workbook, what I love, like you talked about with yourself, is not just reading books, but the ones that have really impacted me and changed me are the ones that I've invested in. So I was taking notes. So there was these aha moments that I needed to write down, or these phrases that are like, man, I need to remember that, or things to unpack. And so in the book, we're talking about, being able to understand your identity, creating your I am statement. We're talking about the 3-step transformational strategy of mastering your thoughts, words, and actions. And they're amazing transformational concepts, but they only transform if you put them into action.
Mm.
And so with the workbook, it's given you, the time and the space within those chapters. It's broken up by chapter as well, so that as you're going through a chapter, you can write down those things that are those aha moments, those things that are like, man, this is gold. I need to keep this in mind, right? Or the other part is being able to start to flesh out some of those things. Okay, how do I know who I am? How do I have a vision for what it looks like to be a dad, and not just understand how to do it, but have a place for you to go back to refer to not just remind yourself of, but to really start to unpack. Life mastery happens as a journey, not as a moment. And it's in that journey that you start to make yourself better by giving yourself resources and places to do that. And so that's what the thought process was, and the vision behind the workbook, so that you can have a place to do that and something to refer back to remind yourself in those moments where you do feel stuck, or you do feel like you need to restart.
That's awesome. Awesome, awesome. I love it, man. Thank you very much for sharing that. I'm glad you came out with the workbook. That's just an added bonus for the book itself. Listen, guys, Mark is a great dude, a great resource. I highly recommend you follow him on Instagram. I have his links in the show notes below. But Mark, it has been a pleasure having you on, brother, as always. And we still need to get together. We've been talking about it. We still need to get together. We're like almost
Yes,
neighbors. So we're going to make that happen. I promise you, we're going to make that happen. But Mark, thanks for being on, man. I really appreciate it.
absolutely. Always love the conversation, Bryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. But listen, guys, it's been another episode of Dad Up. I want to thank my good friends Mark Collins for being on. Make sure you check out his book. Make sure you get the workbook, and make sure you follow him on Instagram. Like I said, he's a phenomenal resource, just a great dude and a great family guy. So I highly recommend you give him a follow. And if you are not yet subscribed to my show, please make sure you do that. Please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of the awesome guests I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at Dad Up Podcast. Until next time, everyone, Dad Up.